I'm Ellen Binns, coming today from Wheaton, Illinois, in the USA. Welcome to Impact, a podcast about how we can each bring about real change in the world and getting practical in making that happen.
And hello, I'm Clive Johnson, coming today from Leigh-on-Sea in the UK. A special welcome if you're listening for the first time, and a big thank you to our new subscribers. Each week, we look at one aspect of how we can connect our hearts to offer healing for others with our collective intention, prayers, and meditation, and go behind the headlines of a critical happening in our world that needs our attention right now.
In today's episode, we take one of these regular deep dives to more fully understand and tune in with something many of us may know only a little about and see where we might hone in with our prayers and intentions. And as we record, it's March 19th, 2025.
We turn our attention this week to a very disturbing topic, but one which we believe is very important to make front and center for our intentions and prayers. Now, we should warn you that we will be talking about atrocities that are disturbing and that may upset some, if indeed not all, of our listeners and ourselves. So please use your discretion here. That said, as we know, when our hearts are grieving, we might remember that we can be of great service for those who have been victims of such horrors, and may even be emboldened and more intensely focused in our intentions. This week, we turn our attention to the horrific incidents of mass rape against women. We honor that men, and especially boys, are also victims. However, as always in being specific with our intentions, in this episode, it's specifically the much larger scale of abuse against women and girls to which we will be focusing our attention. Late last year saw the trial of 51 men ranging in age between 26 to 74, who were charged with rape and sexual assault against Gisèle Pelicot, a 72-year-old French woman. Gisèle had been drugged and raped by many men for over a decade in an appalling series of abuse orchestrated by her former husband, Dominique Pelicot. She had been rendered unconscious by him and then raped by numerous men, at least 83 of whom were captured on video and in photographs. Her former husband admitted to drugging and assaulting her, as well as facilitating her rape by other men. Very bravely, Gisèle waived her right to anonymity and has become a prominent advocate for victims of sexual violence in France. Really remarkable woman, and I'm sure we've all been inspired by her courage and just tremendous strength. And were it not for that, perhaps the full horrors of this story and the effects it has on women like her will not be known.
Absolutely. And I love that these men were brought to justice. I think some of them were serving over 100 years, prison terms. And it's horrific. It may be noted that many of them found her husband's offer on a website for this type of thing. So it's probably still happening somewhere that we need to remember that too.
Yes.
This month, we've learned that mass rape is still being used as a weapon of war. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights says that it is being used systemically in the war in Sudan, reporting that the Rapid Support Forces in that country have been responsible for approximately 80% of reported rape since the civil war began in April of 2023. These include 221 cases of child rape since the beginning of 2024, with some victims being only 1 year old, according to UNICEF. In Sudan, women and girls are also being subjected to sexual slavery, forced marriages, and forced pregnancies. And lest we might think that using rape as a tool of war is a practice of some countries, but not others, we might find it sobering to consider that it's estimated that as many as 190,000 rapes were committed by U.S., British, and Canadian servicemen in Germany during World War II, often at gunpoint, while estimates of the number of rapes committed by the Soviet Red Army in that war ranged from 430,000 to between 1 and 2 million rapes. Very few were ever held accountable for their crimes. Sadly, These are not the only cases of their kind, and more sadly, such abuse continues to occur worldwide.
Very sobering, isn't it, to consider what goes on in war and often isn't brought to account.
Absolutely. And even these statistics
Yes.
are only the ones that were reported or estimated.
Or even known.
Right.
Well, it's not prominent in the history books for many of us.
Like if somebody took my blood pressure right now, they'd probably take me to the hospital.
Mm. Now, gang rape and mass abuse of women by groups of men, of course, is a serious global issue, although precisely how prevalent it is hard to pin down, owing to a lot of underreporting or suspected underreporting. Apart from the horrific cases in Sudan and France that we've mentioned, other prominent recent cases include the jailing of 4 men in March 2024 for grooming and raping a 13-year-old girl over 9 months in the northern UK city of Newcastle. I was thinking also another northern UK city, Rotherham, there was quite a horrendous grooming case that came to light as a result of investigative journalism just last year. The 2020 Hathras gang rape and murder in Uttar Pradesh, India, and the conviction of 4 individuals for the 2020 gang rape of a teenage girl in Eilat, Israel. That particular case shocked the country, as testimony given at the trial indicated that a large group of men had lined up outside the intoxicated girl's hotel room to assault her. In Bangladesh, 1.9% of rural men and 1.4% of urban men are reported to have committed gang rape against a non-partner woman. Nigeria reports thousands of gang rapes annually. And in Pakistan, the 2013 National Crime Data Report indicated that about 10% of rapes were gang rapes. Even more staggeringly, a study of gang rape cases in the US and UK found that over 20% of their victims died from injuries sustained in the attack.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Only in this month, police arrested 20 individuals in connection with charges of sexual assault, rape, and the gang rape of a teenager over 5 years by 60 men in Kerala, India. And also in India, 2 men were arrested in the south of the country in connection with the gang rape of 2 women, including an Israeli tourist earlier this month. Overall, the number of rapes officially reported, including but not limited to gang rapes, remain high rates in many countries. For example, in 2022 in Grenada, there were 144 rapes for every 100,000 people. In the United Kingdom, 109 rapes per 100,000 of the population, and 126 victims per 100,000 in Australia. However, these numbers likely underestimate the true prevalence of gang rape and mass abuse. As we've said, many cases go unreported due to various factors, including shame, fear of reprisal, and often a lack of faith in law enforcement.
So what are the main challenges involved in bringing those involved to trial? Gang raping of women by organized groups presents profound challenges to justice systems and societies around the world. Based on evidence from legal analyses and survivor testimonies, the complexity of addressing crimes of mass abuse stem from systemic, cultural, and institutional barriers. Firstly, in some countries, there is a systemic impunity for perpetrators of these crimes, often assisted by a weak criminal justice infrastructure. So in conflict zones like Sudan, and also at the moment, DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, armed groups often exploit the collapsed state authority to commit mass rape with impunity. Sexual violence is weaponized to terrorize communities, often occurring in public spaces or alongside executions of family members. Survivors face not only trauma, but also exclusion from medical care and social ostracization, deepening their vulnerability. The legal systems in such contexts lack the capacity to pursue perpetrators, many of whom remain active in the same communities as their victims. Secondly, survivors frequently encounter social prejudice that prioritizes protecting perpetrators over delivering justice. In the DRC, husbands and communities often abandon rape survivors, exacerbating economic and emotional suffering. And similarly in the UK, Black and marginalised women have often faced disproportionate scepticism from law enforcement, with stereotypes about their credibility, for example, due to their being intoxicated, drugged, or involved in sex work, undermining investigations. I think it can work the other way. I mean, the Rotherham case, the main perpetrators that were convicted were from an Asian background, and there's been quite a big inquiry into this that reported fairly recently. And it seemed that certainly within the police, there was a reluctance to bring an ethnic minority to trial. So it can work that way as well, curiously.
Horrible. And I think it bears repeating to say sexual violence, it's a weapon
Yeah.
in war.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we can believe it's going on in every conflict zone.
Absolutely. So these biases are amplified by rape myths that question victims' accounts unless they conform to narrow expectations of ideal survivors. Even when cases come to trial, rapes can be notoriously difficult to prove and are harrowing for victims as defense lawyers seek to discredit their testimonies, often subjecting them to lasting trauma and isolation. Juries may also be reluctant to convict alleged perpetrators on a balance of probabilities basis, recognizing the consequences for the convicted if they make a mistake in their judgment. The thresholds of evidence required to convict in many countries are high. The law typically requiring proof of non-consent and the perpetrator's awareness of non-consent. And this may be why Gisèle's case was so impactful, because none of these factors were involved. It was so clear.
Yes. Yes. It's just the nature of this crime, isn't it? That it is so difficult to bring to trial, and where there are these such high thresholds, and where the victims are often really subjected by defense counsel to further abuse, essentially, in the courtroom.
Horrible. Legal barriers also often make prosecuting gang rape difficult. Since most assaults occur in private with no witnesses beyond the victim and perpetrators, there is often a lack of corroborating evidence. In some contexts, such as has been seen in El Salvador, gangs threaten women about coming forward to report a crime, meaning that many do not out of fear of retaliation for themselves and their families. Of course, it's the classic case. Even where victims are willing to come forward, there's often chronic underfunding for victims' care and legal advocacy, and the prospect of police dismissing complaints from marginalized groups, as happens frequently. Those seeking asylum or residency in a country other than their own are especially vulnerable to be failed by the legal system, as their precarious residency status may prejudice their opportunity to remain in the country, let alone enable them support to bring a case to trial.
These challenges are hard to address, requiring a strengthening of justice systems, including training for legal professionals to combat biases and improve evidence collection in sexual violence cases, ring-fenced long-term funding for organizations serving marginalized survivors, safeguarding civil spaces and empowering women's networks, while challenging gang dominance, and legal reforms to enforce victims' rights and protection within criminal justice processes, alongside policies to protect immigrants who may fear reporting a crime. At the same time, more needs to be done to educate men, especially young men, about the evils of gang raping and mass sexual abuse of women. Some school-based programs do exist. For example, the Rape Crisis National Sexual Violence Prevention Program in Scotland, which offers free workshops for students aged 11 to 25. These cover topics like consent, power, understanding sexual violence, and pornography. While the Resilience, Rights and Respectful Relationships program in Australia combines social and emotional learning with gender-based violence prevention. The SCORE curricula in several countries now includes teaching about sexual violence. I was actually, as it happened earlier this morning, listening to a radio debate which featured a speech by the former English football manager, Gareth Southgate, who's widely seen as a very good role model for young men. And he was talking about the problems that are, this is a related, but perhaps a slightly separate topic, not to go into, but the problems a lot of young men have in coming into adulthood, the lack of role models, good role models, the impacts of social media and influences there, the lack of maturity a lot have when they come into sexual maturity, which I suspect may also play into this, that, that there are a lot out there who are not mindful of bad behavior. They're not really conscious of the impacts on others. So it just brought home, I think, again, how critical education must be at quite an early age.
Absolutely. And besides education, a cultural shift
Yes.
to shame this type of behavior. For
Yes.
instance, when we just mentioned, the woman who there were men standing in line outside the hotel room to assault her. What?
Yes.
What the heck is that? Why did those men standing in line think they had access to her body? Why? What allowed that? And that needs to be addressed. And I unfortunately think it has to come from the men. They
Yes.
have to stand up and say, dude, not
Yes.
cool.
Yes.
No,
Exactly. Yes.
that's not happening in
No.
this world
No.
anymore.
No.
And I don't know if that's happening as strongly as it needs to be. I think it could be
Well,
stronger.
it seems it's very difficult. I was actually listening to a podcast last year about particular problems in Australia. I think it might have been in certain Australian states around changing what was previously a very macho culture. And it still seems that it's taken 20 years or something of these kind of programs,
Mhm.
changing the school curricula and encouraging young men to call out others who misbehave and so on. There's still a high prevalence, as we mentioned from those statistics earlier. There's still, for
It's
some
nothing more
reason, this
macho.
macho. No, exactly.
There is
Uh,
nothing more macho than standing up for the rights of women.
no, exactly. Exactly. But it's clearly something that can take time to
Mhm.
really bring about a major cultural shift where it's been so ingrained.
So at least such initiatives are being complemented by community and government funded initiatives in some areas. For example, in the UK, the St. Giles Trust SOS Plus service offers intensive mentoring for at risk youth. While in the United States, the Rape Prevention and Education Program funds health departments across the country to implement statewide sexual violence prevention plans. These initiatives focus on prevention, aiming to stop violence before it occurs by educating young people about consent, healthy relationships, and the consequences of sexual violence. They are seen as vital to bring about a cultural change that we talked about and combat the attitudes of their peers and the pressure they often feel guided by to conform with the leading of their mates,
Mm,
as you say in England.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll get there, but it may take some time, as you said.
Yeah, I think so. And sadly, as we know, toxic masculinity also remains strong in many societies, with social media influencers such as the controversial former professional kickboxer Andrew Tate being widely associated with perpetuating misogynist views. As of August last year, Tate alone had amassed just under 10 million followers on X. At the same time, several social media platforms, as we know, have moved in recent months to weaken monitoring of hate speech on their platforms rather than strengthening controls against that.
Well, that's not a move in the right direction,
No.
but hopefully some influential people will stand up and combat these
Yes.
views and make Andrew Tate look silly for what
Yes.
he says.
Yes.
That's what we can hope for. So, where might we hone in with our intention and prayers? As we usually do, we invite you now to join us in holding intention for a number of needs that have struck us in contemplating this subject. And as we've done in the past few weeks, if you're in a place where you can center yourself, put your feet on the ground, take a deep breath, and listen with your heart as we mention these intentions, that would be helpful. As always, these are just suggestions and don't, of course, include everything. So go where you feel led. This is what came to us. A will for education departments and all who have influence to enhance educating young people about the horrors of abuse, that they aim to address the root causes of violence against women by challenging harmful cultural norms, promote gender equality, and foster healthy relationships from an early age. This may include integrating appropriate training in school curricula and increasing government and community training and funding to support such initiatives.
And alongside education in schools and in higher education, we might ask for an urgent movement among influencers and decision makers in governments to legislate, educate, and know where to direct attention to influence a change in societies towards honouring and protecting all women and girls.
We will for wisdom for those involved in investigating, reviewing, and bringing to trial those who perpetrate mass rape, and for the police and those in the criminal justice system to know where to direct their attention and resources for the highest good.
And we ask for compassion in all military groups that are engaged in conflict, including among their command, to recognize the abhorrence of using rape as a weapon of war. Today, we will especially for a movement of compassion among the militia fighting in Sudan and the DRC.
We will for those with influence to enable specialized training for legal professionals in all jurisdictions to combat biases and improve evidence collection in cases of sexual violence.
We offer a plea for governments to ring-fence funding for organizations supporting survivors of rape.
We ask that in countries where intimidation of rape victims by gangs threatening violence is present, that those with authority will be moved to protect civil spaces, enabling women's networks and others to have free, protected voices that can challenge gang dominance.
We ask that all with influence in all countries where migrants are seeking residency will implement and enforce policies to protect immigrant victims of rape, alongside those who allege rape ahead of trial.
We will that there will be a significant heightening of awareness among the people of wealthier nations and a consequent move to support women who live in countries where there is a lack of accessible advocacy and support available to victims of rape.
And we ask for a movement among regulators and policymakers in all social media companies acting to stem the flow of misogynist hate speech on their platforms.
This week, as we reflect upon the horrific incidents of mass rape and abuse against women and girls, and if you're still with us at this point, we suggest holding as our main intention, we will that there will be a significant heightening of awareness among the people of wealthier nations and a consequent move to support women and girls facing trauma as a result of rape or threats of rape in countries that are in or have been at war. Please join us in holding this intention.
We've covered a very painful topic this week, which we're sure will pull at the heartstrings of many of us. If you yourself have been sexually abused, or if you know anyone affected by sexual abuse, we would urge you to seek confidential help. We have put the contact numbers and websites of various organizations in the English-speaking world that may be able to help in our show notes. There's also a list of all European countries there as well, and some that offer support internationally. This is a subject that's especially close to our hearts. Ellen's great passion and work in sacred feminism includes her blog at the site sacredfeminist.com. In an early blog post from way back in 2012, if you remember this,
Yes.
she writes, "A sacred feminist is a person, female or male, who takes the principles of the sacred feminine and puts them into action," and describes the website that she set up as being a place for women and men to learn more about the sacred feminine and then explore ways to make changes in the world that promote balance, healing, and peace. A place where we ask new questions, learn about and create new approaches to today's problems, and honor the work of sacred feminists, past and present. She also comments on how ideas about the sacred feminine and sacred feminism are related, pointing to the characters Melanie and Scarlett. I'm not I'm very familiar with this film. I know it's a classic. Melanie and Scarlett, if you know, in the classic novel and film Gone with the Wind, as being representatives of the sacred and the secular, but needing each other to have impact. And reading some of your posts recently, I was particularly drawn to an open letter you wrote. Again, I don't know if you know this one, to the universe. This is over 10 years ago,
Yeah.
which seemed to chime very strongly with the global healing response theme of authenticity this year, especially the upcoming theme for next quarter, which we'll be talking about very soon, that being the subject of grit. So we'll put a link for that, but do check out that and many inspiring posts on the site.
Well, thanks for reading them, Clive.
Yeah, there's some really good stuff there.
Yeah, I haven't been back to write for a while, and I really am feeling drawn to do that. I do think it's something, it is intended for men and women. But one of my favorite posts is, why is there a market for sexual slavery? Why is there even a market for it? We have to, being a businesswoman, we have to get rid of the demand before the supply will decrease. So, yeah, if you could read that one, I would appreciate it.
Definitely.
And Clive also offers a dedicated ministry for women who want a representative of men to hear and receive their stories and anger and pain. And we'll put the links for these in our show notes. It's a fantastic concept, and heartfelt thanks to you, Clive. And thank you from the women of the world that you have even conceived of this idea to hear the pain and hold it for us.
Thank you. It took me a while, actually, to realize that we can be representatives in our own bodies. We can be representatives of our ancestors' failings and so on. And yeah, it did take me a while to appreciate that we can do that, even if we ourselves are not perpetrators of those crimes. Yeah.
And I think as women, we know there are so many good guys out there. We are not men haters when we talk about this. We abhor the deviant behavior, but there's so many good guys out there who are helping us, who want to help us but don't know how, and who are willing to. So we acknowledge that. We know that exists. I know you're one of those guys, Clive. My husband is definitely one of those guys. And so don't think that this is just male bashing. That's not what this is.
No. I very personally very much get that impression. Absolutely. I think one thing that really struck me when we were putting together that list of help sources and our suggested focus of intention for this week is, sadly, there are many countries in the world where there's almost no help available. At least if it is, it's on a very local and not very visible level. It is sadly in places like Sudan and DRC, where people have very limited access anyway to internet or phone systems or whatever, where a lot of the victims are left on their own unless they've got family and others around them that can support them.
Well, and we could do a whole nother episode on the cultural allowance of these behaviors.
Yeah.
Afghanistan
Yes.
being one, where culturally it's acceptable to do these things. And that's what has to change too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes it's even done in the name excuse of religion.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's another episode.
I think so.
But that about wraps it up for this episode. Remember, you can connect with us in the Facebook group and for live intention holding in Clive's daily Insight Timer offerings, and with me in the Labyrinth Activists Network's Zoom calls. Details of how to hook up with these are in our show notes. Look out too for our next special topic episode, which we'll be releasing in the next few days. Thank you for listening and for sharing with us in holding intentions. We look forward to connecting again next time. And in the meantime,
Thank you. Go well. Stay safe.
And remember, we're more powerful together.
Impact is presented by Ellen Binns and Clive Johnson and produced by Impact Productions. Our theme music is by Chris Collins and our logo artwork is by Auto Classic. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible or your favourite podcast provider. We're a non-commercial podcast dedicated to people of any faith tradition or none who yearn for healing in our troubled world. Please pass on the word so others may join us in making an impact. Thank you for listening.